Good morning, everyone who is here for today's CEQA scoping meeting. We're going to allow 2 minutes for everyone to log on, and then we will begin the meeting. Thanks for being here. Okay, well, here we go. Good morning. I'm Jean Bandura, the Senior Environmental Scientist of the Wetlands Permitting and Enforcement Unit 2, which is one of the water quality certification units here at the State Water Board. I'm joined by environmental scientists Jessica Leonard and Chris Monnery, who will facilitate today's meeting. Thank you all for joining today's CEQA scoping meeting. Here is the agenda for the day's meeting. A few notes on meeting logistics. Please hold all questions until the end of the presentation. Once the presentation ends, we'll allow time for registered participants to ask questions or provide comment. Let's begin with a background on the need for this project. In response to California's wildfires, the state legislature adopted Senate Bill 901 in 2018. Senate Bill 901 requires electric utility wildfire mitigation plans to include a vegetation management component. The work outlined in wildfire mitigation plans, also called wildfire mitigation plan activities, range in nature and environmental impact. Activities can be grouped into two broad categories. The first broad category is vegetation management, which includes activities like thinning and removal of vegetation along utility right-of-way corridors. The second broad category is system hardening, which includes activities like undergrounding electric lines and replacing a culvert. These activities have the potential to liberate sediments and other waste that can enter waters of the state. Section 13263 of the Water Code requires that the State Water Board prescribe waste discharge requirements that implement water quality control plans. The focus of this order would be on activities near or in waters of the state. For example, placing an electric pole in a wetland is an activity that requires a 401 water quality certification from the Water Board and a 404 permit from the Corps. Culvert replacement is another activity type that commonly requires a water quality certification. As another example, constructing a new access road that crosses the water would also be regulated with waste discharge requirements. Today, the Water Board relies on several existing actions that may be used for utility work and utility permitting, including, as I mentioned, 401 water quality certifications, WDRs, the Water Board certification of the Corps' nationwide permits, and by Corps I mean U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the construction general permit. To balance environmental protection with the critical public safety work completed under wildfire mitigation plans, the State Water Board proposes development of a general order and a related programmatic environmental impact report, which I'll also refer to as an EIR, to streamline electric utility permitting for activities that have the potential to discharge waste and impact water quality. The EIR for this permit or general order is the item that we are here to discuss today. The purpose of today's CEQA scoping meeting is to collect oral comments on the content of scope of the proposed EIR for an electric utility general order for waste discharge requirements in Clean Water Act Section 401 water quality certification for electric utility operations and maintenance activities related to wildfire mitigation and other similar activities statewide. This general order is a discretionary project and the State Water Board is lead agency. We're developing a programmatic EIR to analyze the effects of this project. We'll discuss the general order structure later in this presentation. Now, written comments will be collected for the duration of the comment period, which ends on March 4th at noon. The goal of this proposed general order is to develop a streamlined permitting process for utility wildfire mitigation plan activities and other similar projects that protects aquatic resources, such as California's wetlands, streams, and lakes. Our intention is not to establish regulatory review over the entirety of the utility right-of-way, but only those locations and activities that have the potential to discharge a waste into a water of the state. Our administrative goals are to have a streamlined application process that is protective of water quality and facilitates this critical public safety work. To meet this goal, we're working with State Water Board Emergency Management Program staff who are knowledgeable on the type of work completed during post-fire response activities to find solutions for an administratively appropriate permitting process for post-fire response and operations and maintenance activities. And we will also coordinate with sister agencies to avoid incompatible requirements. Now we're on to the who, what, where of today's presentation, the project scope. This general order would only be for use by electric utilities. The proposed scope would cover all wildfire mitigation plan activities that have a potential to discharge a waste to waters of the state. At a high level, the project would cover system hardening, facility maintenance and replacement, and vegetation management. Being that this is a programmatic EIR, the list of projects that would be enrolled under the general order is unknown. Although specific project locations are not yet known, the programmatic EIR will provide known details about the activities and the reasonably foreseeable effects of those activities on the environment later, activities will be examined in light of the EIR and in accordance with CEQA guidelines, section 15168. We're developing permit conditions necessary to control waste discharges to prevent exceedances of water quality objectives or impairment of beneficial uses. Conditions would cover potential waste discharges from the activities that I'll discuss in just a few slides. This project has a statewide geographic scope. The map on the right shows the geographic extent of wildfire mitigation plan activities. It is a map of California's high fire threat areas. Senate Bill 901 describes the work that should be completed within this area to prevent future fires, which means this map shows the work boundaries of utility wildfire mitigation plans. And I previously mentioned that the Water Board routinely issues 401 water quality certifications for in-water work. Utility infrastructure operation and maintenance activities, for example, undergrounding of electric lines, is conducted in a similar manner regardless of whether that operation is within or outside of the wildfire mitigation plan area. This general order proposes to cover utility operations and maintenance activities, even when they're not directly related to wildfire mitigation, because those activities have the same potential effects on water quality and are also needed to ensure grid reliability. This means that the geographic scope of the EIR and the general order is statewide, which is, of course, is the map on the left. We see this order as an opportunity to bring consistency to utility permitting throughout the state. A variety of electric utility operations and maintenance activities that take place throughout the state are proposed for inclusion in the general order. We're on to the project description now. The listed activity types, when discharges may affect the quality of the water of the state, that are proposed for general order inclusion are shown on this slide. We developed this list through meetings with the utility companies and a review of wildfire mitigation plans that have been submitted to the CPUC. The goal is to cover most activities conducted pursuant to a wildfire mitigation plan that may discharge a waste to waters of the state. And I'm now going to focus on potential water quality impacts associated with the first 3 activity types, but a brief description of each activity is listed in the public notice that you received for this meeting. So first, vegetation management. Vegetation management includes the trimming, mowing, removal, pesticide application, or other prevention methods used to manipulate vegetation underneath or adjacent to existing circuits, electrical structures, and facilities. And utilities are clearing vegetation along their right-of-ways. I'm going to list some water quality impacts that could be associated with this work, including a loss of riparian habitat, altered flows as roughness is decreased in response to removal of vegetation, a loss of shading that could increase water body temperatures and impact anadromous fish, herbicide use to control vegetation regrowth, and there could be other impacts. Now, I cannot stress enough the importance of post-fire response work. And as stated, this is an area where we will especially focus on the opportunity for a streamlined administrative process. But these activities, including hazardous tree removal, repair and replacement of burned facilities, pose a potential risk to water quality. In current operations, we're seeing the potential for impoundment caused by felled trees left within surface waters throughout multiple watersheds across the state. Further, while the environmental baseline is very different in a post-fire environment, the actual work performed is similar to work performed in areas that haven't experienced a fire. Moving on to site access. Whether needed to access a site to complete work outlined in a wildfire mitigation plan or in a post-fire setting, site access poses risks to water quality. The scale of earth moving needed to create roads to access utility infrastructure could be extensive. Access road construction is a major source of sediment to nearby surface water. Proper design considerations and erosion control BMPs are needed to prevent gullies and stream channel formation within access roads. In other words, BMPs are needed to move water off the road and away from the hillside to protect our surface waters. Here's the full activity list again. Excuse me. Activity number 4, application of fire retardant chemicals as a fire suppressant instead of during firefighting activities, is a newer issue that's been gaining interest in recent years. Our intent in listing it here is to acknowledge that the Water Board is actively involved in reviewing pre-fire application of these compounds and their impacts to waters. Fire retardants and suppressants may not be an issue, and we're making no assumptions that they are. The activity is listed here because we will do our due diligence to ensure that water quality protections from application of these materials. The remaining activities are similar in nature and pose similar threats to water quality. For example, infrastructure replacement and maintenance projects, activities 5 through 13, are earth-moving construction activities. These may result in a discharge of sediment to nearby surface waters, result in a hydromodification, alter or impede flows, destabilize stream banks, or reduce habitat availability. Again, there's a brief description of each activity in the public notice for today's meeting. That was a snapshot of the activities proposed for coverage. Now let's discuss what a general order looks like. One way to think about a general order is to think of them as an umbrella order under which individual projects are enrolled. Again, we're developing a programmatic EIR and a general order. Project level analysis will be completed on a project by project level as applications for enrollment are received, following Water Board adoption of the proposed order. The order will rely on 2 categories of Water Board authority: waste discharge requirements, and 401 water quality certifications, and would be required for electric projects with the potential to discharge a waste to water. The order would likely have sections on the list of covered activities, prohibitions from enrollment, for example, projects of a particular size or of environmental significance not evaluated under the EIR may be required to seek individual 401 certification coverage. The order would likely include permit limitations and conditions, for example, a list of access road conditions and conditions on how other activities with the potential to impact water quality could be implemented in a manner protective of water quality and to avoid a discharge of waste. Another section would be a 401 water quality certification section for projects that require a 404 permit from the Corps. The administrative process is still to be determined, but at this point we envision that the State Water Board will develop the EIR and the general order, and then the regional boards would administer the general order, which means that they would review those individual projects for enrollment. Going back to the EIR, when developing the scope for this project, staff considered several options. The Water Board provides comments on the range of options that should be considered as part of our CEQA analysis. The project I'm describing here today is the proposed project, which is covering the range of utility activities that require Water Board permitting under a combined waste discharge requirement and 401 certification. Under the no project alternative, the Water Board may save staffing resources writing and implementing the permit. And we could use those resources in other ways, but the utility companies would still be required to apply for individual permits for water crossings and land disturbance activities. This would increase permitting workload for utilities and water boards and likely result in inconsistency across the regions. A lack of a statewide streamlined permit would likely increase non-compliance events, leading to poorer water quality outcomes. Alternative 3 would limit the permit to only wildfire prevention work. This may be a simpler CEQA process by narrowing the project scope, but would not meet Water Board goals of addressing water quality issues associated with post-fire work, and would instead require the regional boards to create additional permits to cover these excluded activities. This would lead to statewide inconsistency and would likely result in poorer water quality outcomes, as a lack of a streamlined permit process, combined with the need for urgent action to address other public safety needs, could foreseeably result in a reduced compliance rates. Alternative 4 would split the in-water certification and the out-of-water WDR into separate permits, which may expedite one set of activities, but would delay the adoption of one or both permits and would not support the Water Board's goal to have a streamlined permit. Alternative 5 would limit the permit to only high fire threat areas where utility wildfire management plans are required by SB 901, which may be a simpler permit to write, but this would require the water boards to develop a separate permit for equivalent activities outside of high fire threat areas. Creation of 2 separate permits for equivalent actions would likely lead to inconsistency, confusion, and delay. Overall, the proposed alternative provides water quality protections while also streamlining utility permitting. Now, for a reminder on how to submit written comments, I've provided the information here to submit them in writing or through email. Please see the public notice for these details. We're on to the project schedule. We're aiming to release the draft EIR and the general order in the spring, hold a workshop in the summer, and propose for adoption next winter. Oral comments will be accepted in just a moment, and written comments will be accepted for the remainder of the comment period, which again ends March 4th at noon. I think it's safe to say that the water boards want the same thing as the utility companies, which is expedient permitting that protects water quality but doesn't impede wildfire prevention or response work. To meet this end, I want to return to the purpose of the meeting and the current comment period. We're here to solicit input to inform the development of the EIR. Some examples of specific topics that we are soliciting feedback on are there alternatives that we should consider? Are there particular impacts that we should consider? What are considerations for evaluating activities that include a range of environmental baselines, such as those between planned wildfire mitigation plan activities and post-fire response after a fire event? Again, I'm Jean Bandura. Please feel welcome to contact me following today's presentation with any questions on this process. My contact information, these slides, and future project information may be found at the State Water Board's website that's shown on the screen. This is the same website that's listed in the public notice, so you don't have to worry about jotting it down now. And these slides will be posted. And again, these slides and a recording of today's meeting will be posted at that location. The notice also contains registration information for our LIRIS list. We use this list to send project-related information, and I encourage you to sign up. Before we go on to the comments, does anybody have any clarifying questions? If so, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, then we will move right to comments. We ask that you, now the way that we're going to facilitate comments is we ask that you use the chat to indicate that you want to comment. Please place your name and affiliation into the chat, and commenters will be called upon in order that the chat is received. We truly appreciate your time and participation in this process, and Jessica will now manage the list of commenters. So Jessica, please take over from here and unmute the first, oh, one more thing. Please don't unmute until Jessica calls your name. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Great. Okay, so I will call on people as they submit their name to the chat and ask you to unmute to comment. So I will wait until there's anybody who would like to comment. Okay, our first commenter is Hazem Gabber. He's a senior water quality manager with Southern California Edison. Go ahead and unmute yourself to submit your comment.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Great. Thank you for the opportunity. Good morning, Chair Esquivel, members of the board, technical staff. My name is Hazem Gabber. I'm the Senior Water Quality Manager for Southern California Edison. And on behalf of the Utilities Working Group, I would like to take this opportunity to express appreciation for the board's effort to develop a general order for electric utility work activities, especially those activities that mitigate wildfire risk and improve energy grid reliability and resiliency. For about 3 years, the working group of California utilities, which includes Southern California Edison, Pacific Gas and Electric Company, San Diego Gas and Electric Company, and the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, have been collaborating with the board staff to identify the activities and work on this general order. Implementation of a utility wildfire mitigation plan is a key to reducing wildfire risk. We believe that a general order that establishes a clear and a streamlined permitting process will allow the utilities to complete essential maintenance work to reduce wildfire risk and further harden the state electric system in a timely and effective manner, while ensuring water quality protection. The utilities are committed to continuously improving our best management practices to protect water quality, and looking forward for further collaboration with the board. An effective and implementable and reasonable order is a key for protecting water quality and ensuring the ongoing reduction of wildfire risk and overall energy grid reliability and resiliency. thank you for the time, and we're looking forward to commenting by March 4th.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Hazem, for your comment.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, if there was anyone else who would like to do an oral comment, go ahead and put your name and affiliation into the chat and I will call on you.
Okay, if we don't have anybody else who would like to comment, unless someone else from the water board team has anything to add, then we are done here. Oh, we have a question.
This is Hazem Gaber. I just have one question, and I know that I think I see Phil Crater and Paul Hahn on the participating. Will part of this CEQA processing and scoping and the general order development, will that allow for an opportunity to look at the fee structure associated with the SB 901 annual fee that will be funding this program?
Phil, did you want to answer that, or do you want me to answer?
I might want to add to what you have to say, but go ahead and take a shot at it unless you just want to have me answer, Paul. It's up to you.
So Hazem, with regards to the fee structure, right now, our fees are limited to the corporate utilities. This permit would be available to additional corporate utilities. I can't answer you definitively whether or not we would revisit the fee structure for the existing corporate utilities, but certainly we would need to have a fee structure in place to support the other utilities that would take advantage of this permit. I will also say that the fee was set to be able to support the number of PY provided by SB 901. I would expect that if we have a broader pool of fees to support those PY, that we would make appropriate adjustments. It is a little premature to have that conversation, though I understand that that is an important issue to your organization. Phil, did you want to jump in there?
No, Paul, thanks. Well, I shouldn't say no. I do want to add, but I appreciate what you said there, Paul, and I agree with that. Ordinarily, Hazem, I think, we would defer any questions about fees to the emergency regulation fee setting process, because, the board is the one who ultimately decides, and it's a bit speculative on our part, but because there is a tie-in specifically to the existing work that's being done under SB 901 and the positions that were funded there and this effort, I think it's, it's worth noting at least what we think might happen, and I agree with everything Paul said.
Thank you. Yeah, the utility working group will try to address it both on the fee committee. I believe it's mid-year, but overall the thoughts from the utility group that if the work activities is going to broaden the baseline of participant if this program, we ought to at some time that fee structure will align with that broad permitting group rather than just the few that it's targeting today. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's certainly room for that conversation. That seems reasonable.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for your input, Hazem.
Okay, does anybody else have any comments or questions? Then that concludes today's scoping meeting. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.